Ethan never expected his marriage to crumble over a single dinner conversation. Laura sat across from him, calmly announcing that her ex-boyfriend Mark would be moving into their home for a while, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. She didn't ask. She didn't explain. She simply stated it, like a decision she had every right to make. Ethan kept eating, his face unreadable, his heart sinking with every word she spoke. He didn't argue or raise his voice. He didn't demand an explanation. He just watched the woman he married reveal a version of herself he had never seen before. By the time he placed his fork down, the marriage was already over in his mind. And when the sun rose the next morning, Ethan would make a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Ethan woke up before the sun, long before the alarm he normally relied on. His mind was strangely calm, clearer than it had been in months, as though his body had already accepted what his heart finalized the night before. He got out of bed quietly, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the closet, not because he cared about waking Laura, but because he didn't want to hear her voice. Not today. Not ever again. He showered mechanically, dressed in silence, and stepped outside into the cool morning air as if he were escaping a burning house. In a way, he was. The drive to the apartment complex took only 15 minutes, but each minute felt like another thread of his old life snapping apart. When he walked into the leasing office, the agent barely had time to greet him before he said he wanted a unit immediately. No tour. No questions. No hesitation. The agent looked surprised but handed him the paperwork, and Ethan filled it out with a steady hand. He signed the lease for a small but clean one-bedroom apartment, a place that smelled like new paint and fresh carpet, nothing like the home he had shared with Laura, where every corner now felt tainted. Within an hour, he had the keys. Within 2, he was hauling boxes into the elevator, packing only what was truly his: clothes, documents, a few books, and the memories he wished he could leave behind. He didn't bother taking their wedding photos. He didn't take the gifts that were meant for the both of them. He didn't take anything that reminded him of the woman who invited another man into their home, without hesitation. By late afternoon, his new apartment looked sparse but peaceful. For the first time in a long while, Ethan breathed deeply without feeling a weight on his chest. But he wasn't finished. He drove back to the old house one last time, walked through the front door without a sound, and placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was the signed divorce petition. On top of it, he set down his wedding ring, cool, metallic, and empty of meaning now. The house was quiet. Laura wasn't home. Mark wasn't there either. Ethan didn't care where they were. He stood for a moment in the kitchen, taking in the silence, letting the reality settle like dust around him. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't sad. He was simply done. When he closed the front door behind him, he knew it was the last time he would ever step inside that place. That night, as the sky darkened and the world quieted, his phone began to vibrate over and over. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. Laura's name flashing again, and again like an alarm he had no intention of answering. Ethan watched the screen light up, then dim, then light up again, and finally turned the phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, he felt free. Laura barely slept that night, packing the hallway with her phone clutched in her hand. Every unanswered call made her more frantic. Every read-but-ignored message made her breathing sharper, faster. She woke up at dawn with swollen eyes, immediately grabbing her phone to send another stream of messages. Questions, apologies, excuses, accusations, all tangled together without pause. When Ethan still didn't respond, panic truly set in. She called her best friend, Megan, spinning a story about Ethan overreacting and abandoning her without warning. Megan rushed over, confused and concerned, but as Laura talked in circles, even she began to look skeptical. Still, Laura needed more voices, more validation, so she called her parents next, sobbing into the phone that Ethan had suddenly moved out. She left out the part about Mark. She always left out the part about Mark. By mid-morning, every relative and friend she contacted had formed some version of the story in their heads, until Ethan began calmly clarifying the real reason. One by one, they reached out to him. And one by one, they fell silent as he explained that Laura had invited her ex-boyfriend to live with them, unannounced and unapologetic. The tone changed quickly. Support shifted. Empathy evaporated. People who had rushed to defend Laura now backed away, suddenly understanding why Ethan walked out. Some even apologized to him. Laura didn't know any of this yet. She was too busy refreshing her messages, packing the living room, gripping her hair with trembling hands. When she heard a loud knock at the door, she rushed to open it, hoping it was Ethan. But it was their neighbor, Tom. He stood with his arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. "I thought you should know," he said slowly. "I saw Mark carrying suitcases into the house yesterday. You two were fighting. Then he left. I don't know what's going on, but whatever story you're telling people, it's not adding up." Laura froze, her jaw tightening. She forced a laugh, trying to wave it off as a misunderstanding, but Tom shook his head and walked away before she finished her sentence. Her stomach twisted. She rushed back inside and checked her phone, only to see 3 more friends had left her messages. Short, cold, distant. One said, "I didn't know you and Mark were that close." Another said, "If you really invited him to live with you, then I get why Ethan left." The last one simply said, "You messed up." Laura felt something break inside her. She sat on the floor, clutching her knees, scrolling through her contacts as if someone might save her from the consequences she had created. The avalanche continued. More messages. More questions. More people wanting clarification. For the first time since Ethan walked out, Laura realized the truth was spreading faster than her excuses. She wasn't in control of the narrative anymore. And without control, she felt exposed, seen in a way she never wanted to be. Yet the worst part wasn't the messages. It wasn't the judgment. It wasn't even the silence from Ethan. It was the growing awareness that everyone now understood something she refused to admit. The only person to blame for all of this was her. Laura stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to steady her breath. She looked exhausted, but she still forced herself to put on makeup, fixing her hair carefully. As though appearances could somehow repair the damage. She needed people to see the version of herself she wanted them to believe. Not the truth. Never the truth. After packing the bedroom for nearly an hour, she finally opened Facebook and began typing a long post. She wrote that she had been helping an old friend in a tough situation. She insisted that Mark was just staying for a couple of days until he could get back on his feet. She framed Ethan's departure as an emotional misunderstanding, hinting that he had always been overly sensitive and prone to dramatic reactions. When she finished, she reread it 3 times, adjusting each sentence to sound sympathetic and innocent. She hit post with trembling fingers. For a moment, it felt like she had regained control. Comments poured in quickly at first, heart emojis, shocked reactions, friends saying they couldn't believe Ethan would leave without talking. Laura exhaled in relief. Maybe this would work. Maybe she could spin this back in her favor. But the illusion didn't last long. Her cousin Alyssa, who had always been blunt and allergic to lies, left a comment that froze Laura's blood. It said, "Laura, stop. You told us yourself that Mark was moving in, not staying a few days. Moving in. Don't twist the story." The comment lit up with likes almost immediately. Then another family member chimed in, adding, "You literally announced it at dinner last week. We all heard you." Laura's throat tightened as more notifications rolled in, none of them supportive anymore. Some people demanded the truth. Others said they had talked to Ethan. A few simply unfriended her without a word. Within minutes, the reactions switched from sympathy to disgust. Screenshots started spreading. People from her office messaged her privately, asking if she really invited her ex to live with her husband. Her phone kept buzzing nonstop until her hands shook too much to hold it. In desperation, she deleted the post, but it was already too late. The damage was done, the fire had spread, and she couldn't put it out. She tried calling Alyssa, but the call went straight to voicemail. She called her sister, who answered only to tell her that everyone knows what you did now, Laura. Stop lying. Just stop. Laura sank onto the couch, clutching a pillow as if it could anchor her to something solid. Every attempt to fix her image only exposed the truth more clearly. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't misunderstood. She wasn't the sympathetic wife, abandoned for no reason. She was the woman who brought her ex into her marriage, pretending it was harmless. She was the reason Ethan left. And now everyone else finally saw it too. The more she tried to rewrite the story, the more undeniable her mistakes became. Her lies didn't protect her anymore. They revealed her. Laura didn't wait another day. She woke up with a single goal in mind: find Ethan and make him listen. She showed up at his workplace just after lunch, her eyes red, her voice trembling as she asked the receptionist to call him down. But when the receptionist returned, her expression was polite but firm. Ethan said he's not available to meet. Laura insisted, claiming it was an emergency, but the receptionist simply repeated the same sentence before walking away. Laura stood frozen in the lobby, clutching her phone, feeling dozens of eyes on her as employees passed by pretending not to stare. She called Ethan immediately, but he sent her straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again, and again. Every attempt went unanswered. She left the building humiliated and furious, dialing her friends one by one, begging them to talk to Ethan for her. Most didn't respond. Those who did were hesitant and distant. Even Megan, who usually defended her, sounded drained. "Megan, please," Laura pleaded. "Just tell him I didn't mean for things to get this bad." Megan sighed heavily before answering. "Laura, he doesn't want to talk to you, and honestly, I get why. You crossed a serious line." The words stung more than Laura expected. She hung up without saying goodbye. Desperate, she drove to her parents' house, hopping for sympathy. Her mother tried to comfort her, but her father, Richard, had a different reaction. He listened to Laura's sob-filled explanation, arms crossed, jaw tight. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "You invited your ex-boyfriend to live with you," he said bluntly. "What did you think would happen?" Laura's voice cracked as she tried to defend herself, but her father raised his hand to stop her. "No, stop. You made a reckless, disrespectful choice, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Ethan has every right to walk away." The finality of his tone left her speechless. She had expected anger on her behalf, some demand that Ethan return, some assurance that things could still be saved. Instead, she received honesty. Painfully sharp honesty. That night, when she drove home, her headlights illuminated a figure on her front step. For a moment, her heart leapt. She thought it might be Ethan. But as she got closer, she saw Mark sitting there with a backpack and a forced smile. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Thought maybe we could talk. I really need a place to crash again." Laura's stomach twisted. She snapped at him immediately, telling him to leave, insisting she wasn't responsible for him anymore. Mark looked offended, then annoyed, and finally resigned. He muttered something under his breath before walking off into the night. But he didn't go quietly. Within an hour, he posted online about her, complaining that she had played him and used him, airing private details she never imagined he would share. Her notifications exploded again, each one another blow to her collapsing reputation. She slammed her phone onto the couch and sank to the floor, shaking. No one was on her side now. Not Ethan. Not her friends. Not even her own father. And Mark, the man whose presence started all of this, had turned against her too. For the first time since Ethan left, She understood the full weight of her isolation. She wasn't just losing control. She had already lost everything. When Laura finally sat down with the lease agreement spread across her dining table, the reality hit her harder than any argument or accusation ever had. Ethan had officially removed his name from every document tied to the house. His signature was gone. His responsibility was gone. And now every bill, every fee, every payment rested solely on her shoulders. She flipped through the papers with trembling hands, feeling her stomach churn as she processed the numbers. The rent alone was more than she could handle on her income. Utilities, insurance, maintenance, everything added up to a total she could never manage on her own. She buried her face in her hands, letting out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. It was panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. She grabbed her phone and called Ethan again. Her voice cracking in the voicemail she knew he'd never listen to. "You're leaving me with all of this," she cried. "You're going to make me homeless. You can't just do this to me." But deep down, she knew he wasn't doing anything to her. She had done this to herself. Still, the fear twisted her thoughts, and she let the self-pity spiral. She started messaging friends, begging for help, asking if she could stay with them temporarily. But the responses were cautious, polite, distant. Most didn't offer anything at all. A few wished her luck. One suggested she move in with her parents. None of them offered a spare room. As she sat staring at her silent phone, another knock startled her. She opened the door to find Mark standing there again, this time looking desperate, shivering slightly, holding a half-stuffed duffel bag. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, as if he still belonged there. "Look, Laura," he started, rubbing his arms. "I really need a place to stay, just until I figure things out. You know I wouldn't ask if I wasn't out of options." Laura felt something inside her snap. A mix of shame, anger, regret, and humiliation boiled together, and she lashed out. "You can't stay here. You are the reason all of this happened. Just go." Mark stared at her like she had slapped him. He clenched his jaw, scoffed, and muttered, "Unbelievable. After everything, you're acting like this is my fault." Before she could argue back, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. Laura thought that was the end of it. But an hour later, her phone lit up with notifications. Mark had made a long public post about her, accusing her of stringing him along, lying to him, using him, and destroying two men's lives at once. He painted himself as the victim. He said she had promised him a place to stay. He implied she had been leading him on emotionally. It spread fast. Very fast. People who had stayed neutral before were now reacting with disgust, disbelief, and pity, not for her, but for Mark. Laura felt her throat close as she scrolled through the comments. Her reputation, the one thing she always protected, was crumbling in real time. No amount of excuses could save her now. She tried posting a response, but comments flooded in faster than she could delete them. Screenshots of her own words, messages she had sent Mark, began circulating. She could practically feel the last remnants of her social circle slipping away from her. All the lies she had told to cover herself were unraveling, thread by thread. By evening, she turned off her phone, unable to bear the constant buzzing. But the silence that followed felt even worse. In that quiet, she finally recognized what she had been running from for days. She hadn't just sabotaged her marriage. She had destroyed her own life, piece by piece, choice by choice, lie by lie. And there was no one left to blame but herself. The courtroom was quieter than Laura expected, almost uncomfortably still, as though the air itself was waiting for the truth to surface. Ethan sat on one side with a calm expression, hands folded neatly, eyes steady. Laura sat across from him, twisting her fingers together, glancing at him every few seconds in hopes he might look back. He didn't. When the judge entered, the tension thickened. Papers shuffled, lawyers straightened their suits, and Laura took a deep breath, preparing herself to salvage whatever she could. As soon as the proceedings began, her attorney nudged her gently. This was her moment. She stood, cleared her throat, and asked the judge if she could speak. The judge nodded. She launched into a rehearsed speech about misunderstandings, emotional distress, and her desire for reconciliation. She insisted the marriage could be saved, that Ethan had acted impulsively, that they just needed time to heal. For a moment, she almost convinced herself her words were true. But when she finished, the judge simply raised an eyebrow. Then he turned to Ethan. "Is there any part of this you agree with?" Ethan shook his head once. "Your Honor, she invited her ex-boyfriend to live in our home without asking me," he said, his voice steady, almost detached. "That is not something I can reconcile." The judge's reaction was immediate. He didn't need details. He didn't need arguments. He didn't need days of testimony. He leaned back, folded his hands, and exhaled as though the case had already been decided the moment Ethan spoke. "In that situation," he said firmly, "there is no basis for forced reconciliation. Divorce granted." Laura's mouth fell open. She stood quickly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Wait, Your Honor, please," she said, voice cracking. "You don't understand the full story. I can explain." The judge cut her off with a raised hand. "Mrs. Carter, what you did constitutes a breach of marital trust. This court will not compel a man to return to a home where his boundaries were violated in such a fundamental way." His tone was final. The gavel struck once, echoing through the room. Just like that, the marriage was legally over. Laura collapsed back into her seat, numb, staring at the table as if it could anchor her. Her lawyer sighed, quietly gathering papers, already distancing himself from the mess. Meanwhile, Ethan stood, thanked the judge, and walked out without looking back. Laura watched his figure disappear through the double doors, realizing she no longer had any place in his life. Outside the courthouse, things unraveled even further. Her mother refused to speak to her for the rest of the day. Her father simply shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. Relatives avoided her. Friends kept their distance. Even Mark, whose presence had started everything, was now nowhere to be found. Still couch hopping, still making dramatic posts online, still blaming her for things she never intended. But none of that mattered anymore. The one person she truly wanted to come back was already gone. Ethan drove to his new apartment, unlocking the door with a strange sense of relief washing over him. He wasn't happy, not yet, but he was free. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe without restriction. As he set down his keys, his phone buzzed with a message from Haley, the woman he had recently begun talking to. Her message was simple, warm, and genuine. He smiled. Not because he had moved on completely, but because he finally felt like he could. In the days that followed, Ethan settled into his new life with quiet confidence. No shouting. No chaos. No manipulation. Just peace. Laura, meanwhile, found herself living in the weight of her own choices. The world she built on half-truths and assumptions had collapsed, leaving her to navigate the ruins alone. But for Ethan, the ending wasn't tragic. It was a beginning. A clean slate. A lesson he would never forget. Sometimes, the moment someone shows who they truly are is the moment you're finally free to walk away. When Ethan stepped out of the courtroom, the weight he had carried for months finally loosened. The divorce papers felt less like an ending and more like a release from a life he no longer recognized. Laura walked past him without a word, her expression tight, her confidence from months earlier completely gone. Mark wasn't with her anymore, and rumor had it he had left the moment things became inconvenient. Ethan didn't care enough to confirm it. He simply breathed in the cold morning air and let the silence settle. For the first time in a long time, there was no tension waiting for him at home, no arguments echoing in his head, no doubts clawing at him. He had rebuilt himself piece by piece, quietly and steadily, while everything around him fell apart. Now he felt ready for something new. Not a relationship, not a grand beginning, just a life where he could choose peace without apology. And as he walked down the courthouse steps, he understood that sometimes freedom begins the moment you stop looking back.